Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Snowpiercer. A great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we're literally picking up where the season 1 finale ended off, and now it's like, Alex is kind of talking on, behalf of Mr. Wilford. So it's like, okay, so basically because the train is stopped, Big Alice is in control of Snowpiercer. So we kind of decide when you don't stop. And now that we're stopped, you have basically 12 minutes to get us all these things on this list. If you don't, you're going to freeze to death. So bye-bye. And it's like, wow. And like everyone having to work together are like, you do this, you do this, you do this. Everyone getting all these different things from all over the place. And it's so interesting, it makes sense in the grand scheme of things, because later on you kind of realize what Alex was doing. Alex was trying to see, I guess this was their way of seeing, how structured things are, because in comparison, it looks like you're going from, a highly civilized, civilization with everything going on, with a Big Alice to, cavemen. It's like, it's almost like they're trying to create that disparity. I mean, to be fair, you're comparing Big Alice to the tail. So, and that's so interesting too, because obviously Wilford doesn't know a lot about a lot of the structure of what went down on Snowpiercer. I mean, granted, a lot of that happened after the fact. So, because Melanie's the one that kind of constructed everything, the social class system afterwards. Granted, Wilford the whole point was at least from Melanie's perspective, it's Wilford just wanted to surround himself with the rich and powerful, because I guess he never was a part of that. So he wanted to be worshipped as a god for being the one to save you. So that's why he gave people the tickets he did. So she basically built off of the system he already built, essentially. So regardless, luckily, they were able to get everything on the list, and it's well, shit, what do we do? They close the door back, are we? But it's oh, we're good. At the same time, yeah, Melanie on the outside doing her thing, trying to, solve the situation. Granted, it's it's getting colder and colder, and her suit's not going to last forever, to the point it literally gets a leak at one point, and obviously we see later on she gets, major, damage to, her shoulder and stuff. It's oh, that was gnarly as hell. But what was really interesting is when she was laying down and she saw a snowflake, she's it's snowing. And then you have Ben being it doesn't snow anymore, which I was the fact is they make that such a significant, I mean, I guess it makes sense, because all the winter, the ice, it's unnatural. It's not, it's artificially created because of the ice age that they manufacturally created. So I guess it's snowing is significant, meaning that some part of the world is still alive to the point that seasons still exist. It's something natural like snow, because all that I think they're trying to distinguish between natural snow and the ice breeze from the world being frozen over. So I think that's such an interesting thing. Obviously we see Melanie kind of scooping up a sample, but then hopping on just before the train pulls off, luckily. But obviously not the warmest reception. Obviously she runs into Kevin, which that actor, I think the most recent thing I saw him in was, I think his character's name was Cade from Blind Spot. I didn't know this. That's one of Josh Roland's kids, I think. I think that's his son, if I'm not mistaken. I never knew that was a kid, but in retrospect, you're he definitely looks like his dad. Him and his sister his sister shares some of their dad's features as well, to a certain extent, I think. But regardless, he's kind of shocking Melanie with that tasing rod a little bit, and then obviously the confrontation. Melanie meets Wilford after all these years, and for him, and I like that we do kind of it's not he comes off a little sinister the way he seems so calm and control, but then Melanie does kind of catch him off guard multiple times throughout the episode, because he's basically, and that shows you his top priority is I mean, it makes sense. Snowpiercer is the last living thing, as he kind of describes it later on, a vein on a marble, a moving vein on a marble that kind of representing what Snowpiercer is for on Earth, but it's like for him, it's Snowpiercer. It's his legacy, but also it's like it's mine. I want it back. It's like she's like, well, I can't give it to you because she wasn't trying to be like, oh, I never give it to you. It's also like I can't give it to you because it's not mine anymore. It's like she's like, well, technically you've been controlling it for the past 7 years. She's like, what are you talking about? It's like, oh yeah, I was pretending that you were still alive. But then obviously a revolution happened and I'm no longer in control. It's like, who is? It's a tailie named Andre, but he was like, what's a tailie? Because obviously, once again, he doesn't know the system of just what was set up ahead of time. But it's like, yeah, things have kind of changed. Obviously they've gone, and then Alex kind of coming in and her and Melanie meeting for the first time after all this time. It's like, wait, you're alive? Oh my God. And she's referring to, hello there, Melanie. It's like, which is shitty, but it's like, because she's trying to disconnect, because she's not, it's like, my mom abandoned me, you're not my mom, you left me to die with a whole bunch of other people. More so than anything, I think it's what rubs her the wrong way. It's like, you left me behind. So that kind of, especially later on when like Melanie kind of talks about, it's like, whatever happened to your grandpa and your grandma? It's like, they decided to stay behind. Like, the person you sent to get us did get there, but grandma and grandpa decided to stay. It's like, yeah, they did, because we know we had heard about that in season 1 about there being people who decided to stay behind to die. They just didn't believe in this, and they were just kind of like, they'd rather meet their end together surrounded by family. Alex didn't leave because she didn't want them to be alone, but eventually Wilford ended up finding her and bringing her alone. And that's why she has this connection to Wilford, right? Well, she's like willing to listen to him. It's like, okay. And she's not willing to listen because she's resenting her mom because it's like, you left me behind. You want to make it seem like Wilford's not that great of a person. At least he was there for me when you weren't, Mom, you know? And obviously for her, it's like, I wanted you to be with your grandparents because I didn't want you anywhere near this guy, because she knows the kind of essentially sociopath, I guess, that, you know, she knows Wilford to be. So it's like, I didn't want you around that, you know? So that's definitely going to be a cantankerous relationship that's going to be developed over the course of this season, like, you know, them hopefully being able to find their way back to each other. But what I also thought was interesting is that Melanie isn't telling her everything, because it's like, what about the snow? She's like, I haven't been out there so long, so but it's like, you're lying to me. It's like, why aren't you telling me the truth about that? And I guess it's because she doesn't want Wilford to know what she, like, I mean, to be fair, she's just guessing at this point in time. She doesn't know for sure. That's why she got the snow to kind of test the samples. So, I mean, we still haven't seen, obviously, the full scale of everything with Big Alice, which is definitely going to be interesting. Obviously, it's just the one car, but still, it's going to be interesting to see, you know, obviously, it's very lavish, because even at one point, Melanie was like, oh, you even have dimmers up here. At the same time, everything on Snowpiercer, it's like, all right, so I even love the whole conversation, you know, from Pike, where he was like, it's so interesting. We spent 7 years trying to get out the tail, and now the tail is like one of the most valuable pieces of property on Snowpiercer, because now it acts as a border between Snowpiercer and Big Alice, you know? And so it's like, all right, we got some people guarded up here. This is going to be like a station for people to kind of, you know, protect the border. Now the whole conversation is like, well, how do we handle this situation? Ben kind of explaining like the circumstances of like, because of what Melanie did, they've got power and stuff like that. They've got control of the engine again, but Big Alice is the one that determines their speed. So she can slow down enough to cause Snowpiercer to slow down so that everyone freezes. So there's still that. Obviously, you still have Ruth being like, let's talk to Wilford about this. Like, let's go about this diplomatically. But everyone else is kind of like, I don't know. Just because it's like, I mean, especially like after everything they went through to get their revolution, just to kind of have it stifled like that, because they haven't even put anything into place. They were still dealing with the aftermath of the revolution at the end of season 1. So it's like, they're still dealing with that. So they haven't had time to put anything in place, because it's just been one thing after another. And so the conversation is like, all right, so what we're going to do is we're going to try and get Melanie back, because we need her back. Obviously Andre's he wants to kind of like, Wilford's kind of dictating the negotiations in this regard. So it's like, to get a little bit more leverage, they were going to, you know, go through, you know, a more forceful angle. Granted, they weren't going to tell Ruth, because Ruth is because even Andre is like, we set up this, we're trying to set up this democracy. It's like, at the end of the day, Ruth, you're going to have to pick and choose, like, which side are you really on? Are you team us like working things out here, or are you team Wilford? And it's like, obviously she's always been team Wilford. That's been pretty clear, but it's like, I think that's definitely going to be an interesting development, especially because it's like, she latched onto Wilford so much, like, oh, he's special, he chose me. It's like, from what we can remember, what we saw in the episode, he literally said, like, oh yeah, I don't even remember who she is. It's like, oh yeah, like that blonde lady from Hospitality. Like, that's it. He doesn't even remember her. And that's going to be devastating for Ruth, because she's devoted so much to him. She believed in him so much. I think that's the irony behind it, is that he's even like, who is she? I don't care, you know? But also, I think that's also supposed to be a representation of, like, unless you're someone important, because I'm blanking on her name, who runs, like, the third car, like, the kind of party club, like, she's the one that had the alcohol that ended up giving to Wilford, because even she was like, she knows, I think, Wilford enough to be like, we need to be careful around him, like, he will, you know, take what he wants, you know, he'll come here to claim our souls if he wants to. Like, he made, like, the moment he had opened up, he was like, and he called out her name. Once again, I'm blanking on it. They literally said in the episode, but it's like, because it's been a while. But what this also says is, like, unless you're someone important, one of the people he specifically chose to put on a train, like, if you're just kind of like the quote unquote help, he doesn't give a shit about you. You know, that's what that means at the end of the day. And I just thought that was so, I think that in itself speaks volumes about who he is, you know, just the little peeks we got into his personality. But, so there's that. Obviously, the whole Zara being pregnant thing kind of gets, you know, revealed. And even Ruth latches onto that, because it's like, there has not been any natural born children on Snowpiercer. So for there to be Zara pregnant, like, she's a commodity. She's like, oh my God, you're pregnant. But also, people are going to resent you a little bit, because not only did you sell out to Tell, and that also included Josie, and that ended up getting her killed. There's that. But also, it's like, you're pregnant too. So that's going to gain you a little strife. So Ruth sets them up in a place in, like, first class, which Andre was like, we can't do that, because their perception of it, Bizarre, is like, oh, but, you know, taking care. I'm like, especially when you're trying to bring the train together to kind of be in a circumstance that could literally make people, like, because Andre's supposed to be a man of the people, and if he's, like, kind of living it up, it's like, whoa, like, what's going on here, you know? And I love him be like, oh, so who owned this chic place? It's like, oh yeah, this 80-year, the Shorts, these 80-year-old couples who basically was it cyanide, ended up killing themselves the moment the tailies took the engine. I was like, and it's like, well, this place needs a little more oomph, you know, little, like, Ruth is like, it would be nice to bring some more, like, joy to this, have a little Rugrat running around and everything. It's like, you're welcome. And it's like, Andre, obviously not comfortable about it. Zara is, because I think in the end, kind of got what she wanted. She wanted out of the tail. I'm granted, she got out of the tail anyway. Now she's moved up in the world too, so that's a whole thing in itself, I'm sure. But obviously, there's the whole situation with Pike, and I love he's talking to that dude, and that dude's like, I'm speaking English too. I forgot what he was saying, like, you douchebag or something like that, because he's like talking to him like he's a caveman, and it's like, once again, it's like the optics of the situation. It's like, to them, you are the cave people, because it's like you've gone a rabbit, and just like, oh, what's their whole deal, you know? And I love that he exchanged fruit for weed, and he was like, all right, everyone can get some if you shut your mouths and don't say anything about it. And I love when Andre and them are walking through, he's like, what's that smell? Why does it smell like weed in here? And Pike was getting high, but they used this as an opportunity to get the door open. And granted, all that is without Mr. Wilford, you know. That's why I think it's so interesting. It's like, even amongst his people, they're like, all right, we can use this opportunity. It's like, we get fruit and stuff like that. It's like, well, they got stuff that you want, so it makes sense. But they bum rush in. It's like, oh, they don't got that many people. It's like, at most, it might be like, I think Ben was saying, like, at most, it might even be 200 people that, you know. But then it's like, oh, like, you know, the Snowpiercer is attacking, and you have Wilford being like, send in, was it Bob? And I think she was like, I think she said Oily Bob or Freeze Bob or something like that. And it was like, which one do you think? And they send in the big dude we met early in the episode. He makes it start freezing in there, and he starts pushing them back. And it's like, well, he came and basically kicked our asses himself. But then Roach also points out he dropped, like, the temperature dropped like 70 degrees. He didn't feel it, like, because the moment they saw him, it was like, what the hell happened to him? So it's like, maybe he might be in that situation. I was about to say, maybe he's in that situation where he can't feel it either because he's been augmented to some way, or maybe he might be one of those people that has, kind of like Nathan from, I mean, granted that was a trouble, but that is like a legitimate, ain't it like a neural issue or something? Where basically I think it's a neural issue. I could be mistaken, where you can't feel pain. It is a legitimate thing. So maybe he legitimately, like, he can do his thing because he doesn't have to worry about being frozen. It's interesting too, because like there's that whole line that was spoken to Bess and that guy where he was like, are you ready for this? She's like, yeah, I'm ready. And he's like, no, you're not. You're still thinking like a brakeman, which means you're just kind of, basically, you're not looking at this situation like you could die. It's like, as Tellys, they've always lived their lives in a position where it's like, we're ready to die at any moment. We know it could happen at any moment. So they've kind of accepted that. So for Bess, she's still not in that same mindset. So hell, and sadly, home dude ends up dead, his body on top of Bess at one point in time, you know? So I think that's going to be a key sign for her going forward. Like, you know, I think she's in this, but maybe even then she still hasn't fully accepted the situation of, like, you know, as a Taily, you just, you accept death. It's like either die by, you know, starving and just being into getting the bare minimum, getting the scraps, you know, in the dark, like either that, you know, you die like that or you die on your own terms. They've lived their life like that. So it's like, if you're not willing to do the same thing, like, you know, you have to think like that. You have to be like that. So I'm curious to see what that means for Bess's story. I didn't talk about it. I meant to talk about it, was the whole, the specific aspect of them having to put their democracy on hold, like everything they were fighting for. And even Javi was like, oh, they're not going to like that. That's not going to be popular. But for Ben was like, well, what else choice does he have to make? Like, he has to put in martial law because, like, obviously the circumstances have flipped. Things have changed. Things have gotten complicated. So it's like, especially now it's like, oh, they've got like essentially their Hulk, which is interesting if they make the reference to the Hulk, because let's not forget, Jennifer Connelly was in the 2003. I think it was 2003, Ang Lee Hulk movie with Eric Bana. So just something to think about. But regardless, so there's that side of things. I think because of that conversation from Kevin, making it seem like, oh, you guys think this is going to work, he's not going to care about you. He doesn't care about anything. All he wants to do is get the train back. It seemed like that might have shifted things for Ruth, because I think for Ruth, and that was kind of a peek into, oh, maybe Mr. Wilford isn't the person I thought he was, because she's kind of thinking like, oh, he's so kind and generous. I mean, hell, even at the end of it, like, you know, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but like, you know, Kevin was like, oh, he's so merciful. Oh, he's willing to, you know, spare us. And it's like, the fact is, he must have been kind of ruling very like dictator, like, I mean, he kind of isn't that very dictator, but very like totalitarian type of rule he's pretty much probably had over them. Maybe that's kind of a reflection of. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I think, you know, obviously they're kind of painting Wilford. I mean, hell, even Melanie looks at him as the devil. So, you know, who's to say other people? With the exception, Alex is probably the only person who doesn't look at him like that. I mean, maybe there are other people up there. I think that's interesting. We've gotten to know, like I said, only like a handful like of people on Big Alice. Like, obviously, maybe going forward, we'll get to spend more time getting to know some other characters. Like, we kind of got to know a lot more people on Snowpiercer and everything. So, but to punish them for their attempt at, you know, trying to get on the Big Alice, it's like, yep, disconnect and reverse, and we'll come back when they're dead. And when they're dead, you will use them as compost. I was like, Jesus, you were messed up. And Alex is just kind of okay with everything. But, you know, you have Melanie being like, you don't want to do this. Basically, that's going to be a shit ton of people that are dead. You're not going to want that on your conscience. She's like, trust me. But Alex isn't listening to her, and she's like, wrong choice, honey, and activates it, try to disconnect, but obviously Melanie set up the bomb ahead of time, and basically it makes it so that they're stuck together now. There's no disconnecting him, and he's like, what did you do? She's like, I told you about this issue before, remember? Like, you didn't really do anything about it, so now we're stuck together. So if you want to kill everyone on Snowpiercer, you'd be killing everyone, yourself included, on Big Alice. And even Alex being like, whoa. Like, despite having her animosities toward her mom, she was actually pretty impressed. She's like, actually, she kind of got you there. So what are we going to do? And it's like, he's like, wait for my orders. And it's like, all right, go ahead. It's like, shut up, you know. That once again, that shows you like how petty he is. It's like, whoa. I know we're in a life or death situation. This could be bad for us, but you wait for me to give the order for us to move. You don't make that decision on your own. Because I mean, also talk about it. It is interesting. I mean, it makes sense in the grand scheme of things. I forgot because she said dad, so I was like, oh, I forgot about that. They mentioned that in season 1? Maybe they did. I didn't remember that. Not unless she's referring, correct me, because I'll probably end up looking it up myself, but it's like, I didn't remember that angle. Like, not unless it's just kind of like, oh, dad, because you've been looking after me this entire time, but it's like, no, I think it's because he legitimately answered. I just don't remember them expressly saying that last season, but they probably did, and just, I mean, to be fair, it's been a while, just, you know, so much other stuff kind of came in between, so my memory's not as clear in certain details and in certain regards, but, also, we saw Home Chick, the psycho with Oz. We saw her for a little bit. So it's like, oh, right. So, still a little crazy. What shenanigans, hopefully not murdery shenanigans, you get up to this season. Especially because you're kicking it with Oz and what the hell that's going to turn into. That's going to be interesting. But, Melanie kind of swayed the situation. So now they've all kind of been spared. But now it's just kind of like, well, yeah, but now we're still in that situation where we are still at his mercy. He's still kind of gotten the reins in control. So obviously it's eventually going to be a meetup between them. Obviously we've seen it in like the trailer, but I'm curious. I would assume that within the next episode or two, we'll get the finally the sit down between the two head honchos, that being Andre and that being Wilford. But you know, we'll kind of see on that front. But also the point I was going to make too, circling back, like the fact is that he made Alex the new Melanie because she's the engineer and everything. But even him being like, oh, what were you working on a farm and everything? It's like, this was my thing, but I brought you up. I basically kind of gave you new, like, so he feels like it's almost the way he's talking to Melanie. It's like, you owe me everything. It's almost like I own you and you went and betrayed me and turned your back on me and stole what was mine, you know? And once again, that shows you who he is. That it's like, it's not for the betterment of humanity. It's like, no, this is mine. This is mine to be worshipped. And, you know, it's like you took my name and everything. It's like, he's so petty. And I like that. That it doesn't, he has a sinister side that I'm sure we're going to see more of. But I like that he is just like this petty bad guy that he isn't. He's smart in his own right, but I don't think he's going to be the like, extremely calculated villain that he kind of is to a certain extent because he bit his time until he was able to finally catch up to them, and obviously, you know, sadly, Melanie kind of fell into his trap of everything. But still, I am excited to have Snowpiercer back. I am very interested to see where things take us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.